I'm going to guess a lot of you listening from around the country and around the world are obviously closely following the coronavirus crisis, the way the world is handling it, how we're all responding. And as you may be able to tell if you watch my show regularly, we are not in our studio. We are in Dallas, Texas, where there is indeed a shelter-in-place rule. So I'm doing the show from home. I'm extremely grateful for my producer, Matt Stoker, who's producing the show from his home, and for the Real News PR studio, who's helping this all happen, even during the coronavirus unfortunate episode we're all going through. I want to start by today in the first five talking about a great thing that happened in America, which was the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, very quickly went ahead with testing and approved for prescription medication in America, the drug chloroquine and some of the related items. The FDA gave emergency authorization for doctors, hospitals to use this medication to help people suffering from the coronavirus. It was a really great thing because when there was first discussion by President Trump in various of his news conferences, he said things like, I've heard this thing is working other places, they're doing testing. And of course, right away, because the lamestream media simply cannot resist any opportunity to attack him, they began mocking and ridiculing and claiming President Trump was giving false hope and claiming he was confusing people. We already talked about in the show the very unfortunate episode in Arizona where a couple consumed fish tank cleaner because a product in the fish tank cleaner had a similar name to the medical product chloroquine. And unfortunately, the husband in that couple passed away. But they were not ingesting the medication the FDA has just approved. To be very clear, the FDA has approved the use in America of chloroquine. And I want to just mention a couple of things that were really interesting about it. For all of the criticism of conservatives and President Trump in particular, that we're too bold with the America First idea, that we never listen to anyone else, that we think we're better than everyone else. The reason President Trump went ahead and made that comment during a news conference about the potential efficacy of chloroquine to help coronavirus patients was because of research done in other countries. In France, a double-blind test was being done. France, where this drug had already been used, double-blind test, meaning they're giving some people the real drug and some people others. And it's a formula they use. But the point is, this doctor researcher in France had said, hey, these are great results. This is 79 out of 80 patients on whom it was tested actually improved. And so we had President Trump hearing about these reports, listening to experts in other countries and saying, you know what, maybe we should try this here. So we had, of course, we had the country of France now approved it. Other countries, including the country of Bahrain, has said they've discovered tremendous results from the use of chloroquine. And so they're thrilled, of course, to have, of course, everyone's thrilled to have any way to fight or to help heal people suffering from coronavirus. So the country of Bahrain has also claimed success of using this drug, which I've mentioned in the past. This drug had been previously approved by the FDA in our country and by countries around the world to deal with malaria. Malaria, obviously a deadly disease, which if you've ever traveled in countries where malaria is common, people take malaria pills the whole time they're traveling, which I have done actually traveling in Africa. You take this malarial drug, and I'm getting at the point, the drug is not something new that dropped out mystically out of nowhere. It's been around for a while, and doctors were discovering it was doing well in helping people with coronavirus. But some Democrat governors, more driven by hatred or disdain for President Trump than for the well-being of their own citizens, and idiotically citing the story of the unfortunate Arizona couple who consumed fish tank cleaner because the name of the product in the fish tank cleaner was something like the actual medical product that you're supposed to be using. Some Democrat governors actually banned the use of chloroquine in their states and announced that doctors would face the threat of losing their medical license should they possibly prescribe this medication. An interesting thing happened actually, though, in Nevada. I understand everyone in America wants us to get through this virus crisis. Everyone understands we have got to get through it. We've got to deal with our challenges and people who are suffering. But the idiotic, politically based reactions of some governors do deserve some rebuke. I will tell you actually about the Nevada governor, because it's kind of funny what's happened with him. He was the first one of the 50 states governors who pounced on President Trump's reference to chloroquine and saying that his wasn't let that happen in his state. So this governor of Nevada, Governor Sisolak, a Democrat, announced that drug was banned in his state. I'm not even sure, by the way, he has authority under federal law to do that. I think there's actually probably a question there whether he even has that authority to order doctors not to use a drug once the FDA has approved it. But Sisolak is now trying to walk back, or maybe his defenders would say, clarify what he previously said. Because now what he's saying is, actually, all I really trying to do was to prevent doctors or other entities in private practice from hoarding chloroquine. I was trying to just signal that you need to leave the chloroquine you already have on hand, and perhaps, and people are in America taking the chloroquine medication already. I was just trying to make sure that we sent the message that we have to reserve the chloroquine for the hospitals dealing with coronavirus patients. So he's saying no ban here. No, never mind. We didn't really mean that at all. Unfortunately, President Trump has gotten into a bit of a back and forth with the Michigan governor, who also, just out of pure nastiness, launched a ridiculous statement saying that in her state, they're not going to have any of this chloroquine. She actually had someone speak up, a citizen in her state, say, actually, when I had coronavirus, I got to take the chloroquine and it actually really helped me a lot. So I wish we could talk about why you're banning it here. So these governors having to walk back the kind of just knee-jerk, do we find another way to attack President Trump reaction to this chloroquine. But in closing out the first five, I want to say this. This ought to be this time in America and around the world when we're all dealing with the alarming numbers related to coronavirus. And they aren't as alarming as many people are telling you, but they are alarming. It's a relatively new disease. It's scaring people. You have people frozen in place, very, very alarmed. There ought to be a dropping away, a leaving to the side, political differences of every kind, and instead an agreement among everyone across the aisle, both sides of the aisle, wherever you stand politically, that we're in this fight together. We Americans are in this fight together to help get help to people who are suffering from coronavirus, to get adequate test kits out to the world, out to America, so that we can find out where we really stand, to help people who are suffering, to try to help stop the spread of this disease, and ultimately to develop a vaccine, to move our economy toward getting the products needed to fight, to deal with the coronavirus, whether it's from masks to ventilators to hospital gowns, all the things that are needed. We ought to have we're in this together attitude. And I will say, to be fair, there are more people coming on board. Governor Cuomo, New York Governor Cuomo first, he's been very back and forth. He praised President Trump for his handling of the coronavirus problem we're all facing, this epidemic we're facing. And then he walked back and said, well, he's done some things I don't like too well. And I'm not sure he's really, he was kind of critical of him. And then he decided, on third thought, here we are in New York. I think maybe we need to try to be working together. So he's kind of backed off from his criticism, is again on board with understanding. And to use the precise term that they're developing, it is the use of hydroxychloroquine. And in New York, they are talking about actually also using that. There's a drug they combine it with. And the whole point is, there are governors finally realizing maybe for once we can drop the endless back and forth, petty, attacking President Trump every step of the way, every word he says. Maybe it's time we band together and act like the grown-ups that the country needs to handle this crisis. And so, closing out, I will say I'm very grateful that FDA moved quickly. That was definitely with President Trump's prodding, telling them, because normally they do want to test, and we're glad that we have an FDA that normally wants to test drugs, even though they had approved this drug in the past for malaria, wants to test drugs, and if it's going to be used for a new application. We're grateful we have that kind of FDA, but we're also grateful in this time where we're living under this struggle that we actually had the FDA respond to President Trump's, as he described it, a conversation kind of saying, you know what, we need this yesterday. We need this testing. We need this done. So they have cautiously given this emergency permission to use this drug. Let us all hope and pray that's very, very helpful for people suffering from coronavirus. And that, my friends, is today's First Five.